Thank you, Maria and Liz, and thank you all for coming today. It's a real honor to be back in Connecticut, where I grew up, and it was an honor to be asked by Site Projects for Brad and I to do this work that engages directly with the history of Connecticut. So when you approach the Whispering Gallery's installation, what you're looking at is a kind of digital whispering gallery. And this plays with the idea of the architectural Whispering Gallery, which is a domed space where people can stand on opposite sides of the room and whisper very quietly to one another. And their voices are carried over the dome to the other end of the room. So you can have a very intimate conversation in a very public space. With Whispering Galleries, what we're trying to achieve is a kind of intimate conversation with history, where you are encountering the diary of an anonymous shopkeeper from 1858 that he kept on a daily basis, keeping note of his trade, of who came in and out of the shop, of what he did. And everything he did involved his hands, whether it was tying up goods in bundles, whether it was weighing a load of hay, or at night, going home and practicing the violin. So in reading these diaries, I was fascinated by the centrality of the hand to the work. And of course, since Brad had already suggested that we use leap motion, it seemed fitting that the reader be interacting with the work with their own hands. So when you approach the diary, you can wipe away the dust of history by passing your hand over what these leap motion controllers are. You can pass your hand through that space to make the dust go away. What is revealed when you do that is an erasure poem. An erasure is essentially a practice of creating poetry out of a source text. So a writer will choose a work of literature and then selectively erase or cover up language from it to leave behind traces of the source that create a new text. So the poems that you see on screen, like this one, I swept a pleasant party to the sea to sing, are created entirely from language within the diary itself. There are 31 entries in our Whispering Gallery that encompass the course of the year from January 1 to December 31. And the diaries give you a flavor of this person's daily life and rituals, and the erasure poems give you a flavor of what might have been going on beneath, what might be the sort of hidden story that didn't get documented, that isn't part of this person's history. Of course, because it's an engagement with history, there is this layering with the present. You see yourself when you stand in front of this camera. Your own image shows up on screen, but it's a distorted image because history looks like us and yet isn't us. So we see a version of ourselves there. And just to give you a little flavor for the erasures, I'll read a few. So this entry is from Thursday, September 2nd, 1858. I weighed a load of hay for William B. about 5 o'clock. I opened the store, swept, etc. And that's an interesting quirk of the time. The shorthand plus sign C is used for etc. Mr. Palmer came to paper the hall. Mr. B went to get grass seed. Miss Bunnell finished my shirt. We found a nest. In the eve, a lecture in the hall. Pleasant. I opened the palm of paper seed, a nest. Friday, September 3rd, 1858. In the store as usual, the North Guilford people are going to the sea. Josiah is unwell. Father and James are going to Daniel's to help him get in some hay, etc. Pleasant day. Miles went to Guilford. Mail day. Evening as usual. So one thing that you may notice, there are names that recur, and this was really fun to encounter in reading the diary. So Josiah works in the shop with our anonymous writer. It's really interesting to not know who the person is, but to know that whole network of associations around him. So Mr. Bishop is the owner of the shop, and his name comes up in almost every entry. There's even an entry, unfortunately, in the summer where his youngest daughter dies in a mysterious convulsion. And so you can sort of get a picture of this one anonymous person based on the network of associations around him or her, which to me is a really beautiful metaphor for the way we all live our lives. We are so much a part of the network of others around us that you can really only get a true portrait of any individual by looking at those people, whether it's their family or their friends. Additionally, since he was a store clerk in a dry goods store, he was living in a very central location in the town. This was where you came not only for goods, but for news. And this is where you came for your mail. Mr. Bishop was actually also in charge of the mail for, I think, 3 or 5 years. So in the process of looking up this diary, I learned more about the other people mentioned than the person whose diaries they actually are. Friday, January 1st, 1858. In the shop, run handles on the machine, etc. In the evening went to Martin Harrison to hear him play violin with a company of others. Came home at 11:15, moonlight. Oh, well, I'll tell you another interesting detail about this diary that I uncovered in the course of reading it. For the first several months, this speaker is working as an axe handle maker. And he details the process of fitting up the handles, shaving them, bitting them, working with his father and someone named James. And about 3 months in, there's an entry that begins, sales clerk. He embarks on a new business, taking a job working in the dry goods store over the course of the very year in which he's keeping this diary. So it's an interesting little detail that he goes from one kind of work with his hands to another. But of course, all of Connecticut at this moment is working with their hands, whether it's the physician Dr. Beardsley, who will come in and work on you by hand, or whether it's the haymakers who are mowing hay on the hill, which you encounter when you get to the month of June. So throughout the seasons, you're encountering everyone working with their hands. So that's another way that the reader can connect back to that part of history by bringing their own hand into the interaction.